The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Unsuitable, it read, far too independent in character and manner. Eleanor Hayes stared at the rejection, the remnants of her life savings spent on a one-way ticket to Colorado Territory, 1876. 3,000 miles from home with no prospects and nowhere to return to. The man who had promised marriage now deemed her unacceptable after a single meeting. As she sat in the lobby of Blackridge's only hotel, contemplating her bleak future, a tall figure cast a shadow across the paper in her hands. "Miss Hayes?" The voice was deep, curious. "I hear you understand bookkeeping and business management. I have a proposition for you that has nothing to do with marriage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Eleanor Hayes had never considered herself particularly rebellious. Back in Boston, she had simply wanted what any self-respecting person would: control over her own life and the dignity of meaningful work. But Boston in 1876 had limited patience for unmarried women of 26 with opinions about business and finance, especially ones whose family fortunes had crumbled with their father's failed investments. When her mother died of consumption that winter, leaving Eleanor alone in the world, with mounting debts and diminishing prospects, she'd made a practical decision. The newspaper advertisement had been straightforward. "Mine owner in Colorado Territory seeks educated Eastern bride. Must be of good character, healthy constitution, and willing to establish a proper home in a growing settlement. Passage paid." Upon acceptance, Eleanor had experience managing her father's accounts before his death. She spoke 3 languages, read voraciously, and maintained a meticulous ledger of her own modest finances. Surely these skills would transfer well to a mining town in need of civilization's touch. She'd written a measured letter highlighting her qualifications, enclosed a daguerreotype that captured her serious expression, and dark hair pulled sensibly back, and waited. The response came swiftly. William Crawford, owner of the Silverton mine in Blackridge, Colorado, found her background suitable and her appearance pleasing enough. He enclosed a train ticket and instructions to arrive by early May. Eleanor sold what little remained of her family's possessions, packed 2 trunks with practical items, and left Boston behind without much sentiment. The city had become a prison of pitying glances and whispered comments about poor Eleanor Hayes, forced to seek a husband through advertisements like common merchandise. The journey west had been grueling. 5 days by train, increasingly rough accommodations as civilization thinned, and connections that frequently ran late. Eleanor had occupied herself by observing her fellow travelers and keeping a journal of the changing landscape. The attorney, seated across from her for the Chicago to Denver leg, had been initially dismissive, then astonished when she engaged him in a discussion about recent banking regulations. "You have a head for figures, Miss Hayes," he'd remarked with surprise. "My father believed women were just as capable of understanding finance as men," she replied. "He simply lacked the talent for it himself, unfortunately. By the time she'd reached Denver, her confidence had grown. The West seemed less bound by the rigid proprieties of Boston society. Women spoke more directly here, moved more freely through public spaces without constant chaperones. On the stagecoach to Blackridge, she'd even met a woman who owned her own dress shop and spoke proudly of employing 6 seamstresses. William Crawford had arranged to meet her at Blackridge's modest hotel, a 2-story clapboard building with pretensions of grandeur in its red velvet lobby chairs. Eleanor had arrived dusty but composed, her traveling suit well made if no longer fashionable. She'd spent an extra hour arranging her hair that morning, wanting to make a favorable first impression. Crawford had been waiting in the lobby, a stocky man of perhaps 40 with a full beard and expensive if somewhat ill-fitting suit. His handshake had been brief, his assessment of her uncomfortably thorough as his eyes traveled from her face to her sensibly booted feet. "You're taller than you appeared in your picture," he'd commented, his first words to his prospective bride. "5'7" Mr. Crawford. My height has never changed." Something in her direct response had made his expression tighten almost imperceptibly. He'd suggested they take tea in the hotel restaurant to become acquainted. What followed was less a conversation than an interview, with Crawford asking pointed questions about her domestic skills, her views on family life, and her expectations of marriage. Eleanor had answered honestly. She could manage a household budget efficiently. Though her cooking was merely adequate, she respected marriage as a partnership with different but complementary responsibilities. She expected mutual respect and a voice in decisions that affected their shared life. "I notice you've brought several books of a scholarly nature," Crawford had observed when a porter passed with her trunks. "I hope you understand that a mining town offers little leisure for such pursuits. A wife's duties here are considerable." "I read quickly, Mr. Crawford. I've never found intellectual pursuits to interfere with practical responsibilities." His frown had deepened. When she'd inquired about his mining operation, wondering if her bookkeeping experience might prove useful, Crawford had changed the subject abruptly. Their tea had ended with strained politeness, Crawford escorting her to the hotel's front desk to arrange her room for the night. "We'll speak again tomorrow," he'd said. "I have business to attend to." This afternoon, that was yesterday. This morning, instead of Crawford himself, a letter had arrived while Eleanor was having breakfast, alone in the hotel restaurant. The message was brief but clear. William Crawford regretted that he did not find Miss Hayes suitable as a bride. She was too independent in character and manner to adapt properly to the role of a mine owner's wife. He had arranged for her room to be paid through the week, after which he considered their arrangement terminated. He wished her well in her future endeavors, though what those might be in a remote mining town where she knew no one, he did not specify. Eleanor had read the letter twice, experiencing not heartbreak, but a cold rush of practical terror. Her funds were nearly depleted. She had no return ticket to Boston, and nothing to return to if she had. She was 3,000 miles from anyone who knew her name. Now, sitting in the hotel lobby with the letter crushed in her hand, Eleanor forced herself to think rationally. She had 1 week of accommodation secured. She had her skills. Blackridge was a growing settlement. Surely there was work for someone who could manage accounts, write correspondence, or even teach if necessary. "Miss Hayes?" The voice startled her from her thoughts. She looked up to find a man standing before her, tall and lean with an air of quiet authority. His clothes were practical, a well-made coat, trousers and boots suited to the mountainous terrain, but without the ostentatious display of wealth Crawford had exhibited. "Yes?" Eleanor straightened her posture automatically, years of her mother's instruction in deportment asserting themselves. "My name is Gabriel Parker. I own the Blackstone mine on the North Ridge." He gestured to the letter in her hand. "Word travels quickly in small towns. I understand William Crawford has reconsidered his arrangement with you." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks, so she was already the subject of local gossip. "News seems to travel at remarkable speed, Mr. Parker." Crawford was discussing his disappointment rather loudly at the assayer's office this morning. Parker replied, a hint of disapproval in his tone. "May I?" He indicated the chair opposite her. Eleanor nodded, curiosity overcoming her embarrassment. Gabriel Parker settled himself across from her, studying her with intelligent grey eyes that assessed rather than judged. "Crawford mentioned you have experience with bookkeeping and business correspondence. Is that accurate?" "It is. I managed my father's accounts for several years before his death and maintained the household ledgers thereafter. I'm also fluent in French and competent in German, should correspondence with foreign investors be required." Parker's eyebrows rose slightly. That's considerably more qualification than I expected. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Miss Hayes, I have a proposition for you. My mine has grown significantly over the past year. The administrative work has become too much to manage alongside the operational aspects. I need a business manager, someone who can oversee the accounts, handle correspondence, manage payroll, and deal with supply orders. Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. You're offering me employment? I'm offering you a position as business manager of the Blackstone mine, yes. The salary would be $40 per month, with a small house on the property provided. It's modest, but clean, with its own garden plot. $40 monthly was a respectable sum, more than many male clerks earned back east. Mr. Parker, while I appreciate the offer, I must ask, why me? You know nothing about me beyond hearsay from a man who found me unsuitable. Parker's mouth curved slightly. Crawford found you unsuitable as a bride because you struck him as too independent and direct. Those are precisely the qualities I need in a business manager. I don't need another mining engineer. I have 3 already. I don't need another foreman. Jenkins has that well in hand. What I need is someone who can bring order to the business side so I can focus on expanding our operations. And you believe a woman can fulfill this role adequately? I believe competence is not determined by gender, Miss Hayes. My mother ran my father's shipping business for 15 years after he was injured in an accident. She taught me that capability matters more than convention. He paused. That said, I won't pretend it won't raise eyebrows. Black Ridge is progressive for a mining town, but tradition runs deep. Eleanor considered his words carefully. She had not traveled 3,000 miles to shrink from the challenge. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Parker. If I were to accept, what would my duties entail specifically? For the next 20 minutes, Parker outlined the responsibilities of the position. Maintaining the mine's financial records, processing the bi-weekly payroll for 38 employees, ordering supplies, corresponding with the bank in Denver and buyers in various cities, and eventually establishing a more efficient filing system for the operation's growing paperwork. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The previous clerk left things in disarray, Parker admitted. He was better with bottles than ledgers, I'm afraid. It will take some effort to establish proper order. Disorder in accounts is like a slow-leaking pipe, Mr. Parker. It may seem minor at first, but eventually it can flood the entire structure. His expression brightened at her analogy. Exactly so. You understand the urgency, then? Eleanor hesitated, one practical concern asserting itself. Mr. Parker, I must ask, what assurance do I have that this position would remain secure? I have no connections here, no safety net should the arrangement prove unsatisfactory. A fair question. I propose a 3-month trial period. If either of us finds the arrangement unsuitable after that time, I will provide a month's additional salary and a reference letter detailing your competencies. Would that address your concern? It was more consideration than most employers would offer a male employee, let alone a woman. Eleanor nodded slowly. It would. There is one other matter, however. My knowledge of mining operations is limited to what I've read. I would need to learn quickly about the specific requirements of the industry. I wouldn't expect you to understand mining operations overnight, Parker responded. I can teach you what you need to know about the industry specifics. Your financial and organizational skills are what matter most immediately. Eleanor took a deep breath. In the span of a morning, her future had collapsed and reformed into something entirely unexpected. Not a marriage to a man who wanted a decorative, obedient wife, but employment with one who valued her mind and capabilities. The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. When would you want me to begin? Tomorrow, if possible. We're approaching the end of the month, and payroll needs attention. Parker stood, extending his hand. Do we have an agreement, Miss Hayes? Eleanor rose and clasped his hand firmly, the way her father had taught her to conclude a business arrangement. We do, Mr. Parker. I'll report to the Blackstone mine tomorrow morning. Jenkins will meet you here with the wagon at 8 o'clock. Pack whatever you need for immediate settlement. We can arrange for the rest of your belongings afterwards. After Parker departed, Eleanor remained standing in the hotel lobby, the rejected bride letter still clutched in her left hand. She smoothed it thoughtfully, then deliberately tore it into small pieces, which she deposited in a nearby waste bin. By afternoon, Eleanor had reorganized her trunks, separating what she would need immediately at the Blackstone mine from what could wait. Her practical dresses, her account books and writing materials, her reference texts on banking practices and contract law, these would come with her. The few sentimental items and finer clothes she had brought for her perspective. Marriage could follow later. At dinner in the hotel restaurant, she became aware of curious glances and whispered conversations. Word of Crawford's rejection had clearly spread, but perhaps news of her unexpected employment had not yet circulated. Eleanor ate with deliberate calm, refusing to show discomfort under the scrutiny of strangers. As she finished her meal, a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found herself facing a woman of perhaps 50, expensively dressed with a stern expression that reminded Eleanor of her former headmistress. Miss Hayes, I presume. The woman didn't wait for confirmation. I'm Margaret Crawford, William's aunt. May I join you? Without waiting for an answer, Margaret Crawford settled into the chair opposite, arranging her silk skirts with practiced precision. I'll be direct, Miss Hayes. My nephew has made a grievous error in judgment. His letter was inexcusably rude and short-sighted. Eleanor wasn't sure how to respond. Mrs. Crawford, Mrs. Harrington, the older woman corrected. Crawford was my late sister's name. I've managed William's household since her death 10 years ago. She lowered her voice. I've come to advise you to reconsider your arrangement with Gabriel Parker. It would be most inappropriate. I beg your pardon. A young woman of decent background working at a mine, living on the property without proper chaperonage. It would ruin whatever prospects you might have for a suitable marriage. William was hasty. He's not sophisticated in his assessment of female character. I'm certain I could persuade him to reconsider. Eleanor studied the woman carefully. Mrs. Harrington, I appreciate your concern, but I've accepted a business position with Mr. Parker. I have no interest in persuading your nephew to reconsider me as if I were a purchase he'd rejected. Margaret Harrington's expression tightened. You misunderstand your situation, Miss Hayes. Black Ridge is not Boston. Our community is small, our social boundaries carefully maintained. No respectable family would welcome you if you pursue this inappropriate employment. Since I came here seeking financial security rather than social acceptance, that's hardly a pressing concern. Eleanor kept her tone even despite her rising indignation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have preparations to make for tomorrow. The older woman's eyes narrowed. Gabriel Parker is an unconventional man with questionable ideas about society. Mine has been successful, I grant you, but his methods are disruptive. He employs Chinese workers alongside whites. He allows a Mexican as a shift foreman. And now he intends to install an unmarried woman in a business position. It demonstrates a troubling disregard for proper order. Eleanor stood, placing her napkin precisely beside her plate. On the contrary, Mrs. Harrington, it demonstrates excellent judgment regarding skills and capability. Good evening. As she walked away, Eleanor felt a curious lightness. Tomorrow would bring challenges, certainly. Working in a man's domain would require resilience and determination. But for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with becoming someone's wife. Gabriel Parker was offering her a chance to prove her worth based on her mind rather than her domestic qualities. In her room, Eleanor opened her journal and dipped her pen in ink. "Today," she wrote, "I was deemed unsuitable as a bride, but valuable as a business manager. Perhaps failure can sometimes be the first step toward the right path, even when that path leads up a mining trail rather than down a church aisle." She closed the journal and began preparing for tomorrow, the first day of a future she had never imagined, but now faced with cautious optimism and determination. The mail-order bride had vanished. In her place stood the future business manager of the Blackstone mine, ready to prove that independence of character could be an asset rather than a flaw. The Blackstone mine perched on the northern slope of the ridge that gave Black Ridge its name, a sprawling operation that looked more organized than Eleanor had expected. She sat beside Jenkins, the mine's foreman, as the wagon climbed the steep, rutted road that switched back and forth up the mountainside. Jenkins was a weathered man of few words, but his brief comments revealed a deep respect for Gabriel Parker. "Mr. Parker runs a tight operation," he told her as they passed a series of carefully maintained outbuildings. "Doesn't tolerate sloppiness or corner cutting. Lost some men early on who thought safety protocols were just suggestions." Eleanor noted the difference between the Blackstone property and glimpses she'd caught of other mining operations on their journey through town. No debris littered the grounds, the support timbers for tunnels looked new and solid, and the workers moved with purpose rather than desperation. "Most mine owners just want quick profits," Jenkins continued. "Mr. Parker's building something to last. That's why the books matter to him. Can't build a future on shoddy foundations, in tunnels or ledgers." They created the final turn, and Eleanor had her first view of what would be her new home. The Blackstone's main operations centered around a large sorting house and equipment shed, with smaller buildings scattered in a rough semicircle. Workers moved between structures carrying tools, ore samples, and materials. Near the edge of the clearing stood a modest cabin with a small covered porch and neat curtains visible through the windows. "That'll be your place," Jenkins said, nodding toward the cabin. "Used to be the assayer's quarters before we built him. A proper lab closer to the mine entrance. Mrs. Jenkins tidied it up yesterday. My wife," he clarified. "She manages the boarding house for the single workers down yonder." He pointed to a larger building set apart from the main operations. Before Eleanor could respond, Gabriel Parker emerged from the main office building and strode toward the wagon. In daylight, she noted details she'd missed in the hotel lobby, the faint scar that ran along his jawline, the slight limp favoring his left leg, the way his eyes constantly assessed his surroundings. "Miss Hayes, welcome to Blackstone." He helped her down from the wagon with a brief, practical courtesy. "I trust the journey up wasn't too arduous?" "Not at all, Mr. Parker. Mr. Jenkins has been an excellent guide." Parker nodded to the foreman. "Jenkins, could you have one of the men bring Miss Hayes's trunks to her cabin? I'd like to show her the office and begin orientation immediately." "Of course, sir. Chen's not on shift yet. I'll send him." Jenkins tipped his hat to Eleanor before driving the wagon toward the stables. "Chen?" Eleanor asked as Parker led her. "Toward the office. Li Chen, one of our most reliable workers, came here from California after the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. Half the men who built that engineering marvel were Chinese, but most mining operations won't hire them now." Parker's expression hardened briefly. "Their loss is Blackstone's gain. Chen has an engineer's mind and a work ethic that shames most. Of the drifters who come through, hoping to strike it rich with minimal effort, the office building housed 3 rooms, a general area with desks for the engineers, a small private office for Parker, and what would be Eleanor's domain. A room filled with filing cabinets, a large desk currently buried under stacks of papers, and shelves crowded with ledgers in various states of disarray. "As you can see," Parker said, gesturing to the chaos. Hollis's departure left things in a state. Before he left, he'd fallen almost 3 months behind on organizing receipts and updating the main ledgers. Eleanor surveyed the room, mentally, cataloguing the challenges. When was the last accurate accounting completed, and do you have a current inventory of supplies or equipment? Last accurate accounting was January, before Hollis's drinking got out of hand. As for inventory, Parker grimaced. We track ore production meticulously, but supplies and equipment record-keeping has been inconsistent at best. Eleanor removed her gloves and picked up the nearest ledger, quickly scanning the entries. The handwriting deteriorated noticeably. In the later pages, some entries illegible or obviously incorrect. Several pages had clear evidence of being altered after initial recording. Mr. Parker, I'll need to speak with your suppliers directly and conduct a physical inventory before I can establish accurate records. This ledger shows purchases of blasting powder that don't align with any production records. Parker's expression grew serious. That confirms my suspicions. I believe Hollis may have been selling supplies on the side or recording phantom purchases and pocketing the difference. The discrepancy suggests systematic theft rather than mere sloppiness, Eleanor agreed. I'll need complete authority to implement new procedures for purchasing and inventory control. You have it. Anyone who resists your protocols can explain their objections to me. He studied her with newfound respect. Most people would have been overwhelmed by this mess. You immediately identified the central problem. Patterns of financial misconduct are often disguised as incompetence, Mr. Parker. My father taught me to look beyond the obvious chaos for the deliberate misdirection beneath. Her first week at Blackstone tested Eleanor's organizational skills and patience in equal measure. The immediate crisis was payroll. Miners expecting their wages on Saturday would not tolerate delays, regardless of accounting confusion. Working 14-hour days, she managed to reconstruct enough accurate records to ensure proper payment, though she suspected Hollis had been shorting some of the Chinese and Mexican workers. These men consistently received less than others with similar positions and experience, she pointed out to Parker late Friday night as they reviewed the figures. There's no documentation justifying the discrepancy. Parker's expression darkened. Correct it. Every man here earns based on position, experience and performance, not origin or language. By the third week, Eleanor had established new systems for everything from supply requisitions to time tracking. Each department head now submitted standardized forms rather than scrawled notes. Purchase orders required signatures from both requesting departments and final approval. Every supply cabinet had inventory sheets that must be updated with each withdrawal. Not everyone embraced the changes. Sullivan, the head engineer, initially resisted the unnecessary paperwork until Parker quietly reminded him that the same record-keeping precision he demanded in tunnel measurements and support placements applied equally to resource management. Li Chen proved an unexpected ally. Fluent in English and exceptionally detail-oriented, he helped Eleanor conduct the physical inventory, his memory for equipment conditions and locations proving invaluable. When Eleanor created a new organization system for the tool sheds, Chen ensured the workers maintained it properly. "Mr. Chen, why aren't you in a management position?" Eleanor asked one afternoon as they reconciled the dynamite inventory. "Your skills clearly exceed your current role." Chen gave her a measured look. "Miss Hayes, you've been here 3 weeks and already face resistance because you're a woman. Imagine the reaction to a Chinese foreman." Mr. Parker doesn't seem concerned with such prejudices. "Mr. Parker is unusual. He judges by capability, not category." Chen carefully recorded the last case of blasting caps. "But even he must consider the practicalities. Some men would quit rather than take orders from me, regardless of my qualifications." Eleanor considered his words as she walked back to the office. Her own position had indeed generated tension. Miners' wives viewed her with suspicion during her visits to town for supplies. The bank manager in Blackridge had initially refused to honor her signature on Blackstone drafts until Parker personally intervened. Even Mrs. Jenkins, otherwise friendly, had gently suggested Eleanor might want to wear less businesslike attire to appear more appropriate. 1 month into her tenure, Eleanor's systems were functioning smoothly enough that she could finally address the backlog of correspondence. Among the unopened letters, she discovered communications from potential investors in Denver and San Francisco, all unanswered for months. "Mr. Parker," she said, entering his office with the letters in hand, "we've missed significant investment opportunities. The Hamilton Group in San Francisco expressed interest in funding an expansion of the North Tunnel, but their letter is dated February with a request for response by March." Parker looked up from the maps he was studying, frowning. Hollis never mentioned any correspondence from Hamilton. What exactly were they proposing? Eleanor summarized the offer. Substantial capital investment in exchange for a 20% stake in future profits from the expanded operation. "Based on the production projections you showed me last week, this would have been extremely favorable. Terms: contact them immediately, explain the situation with our previous clerk, and see if their interest remains." Parker ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. What else did Hollis forget to mention? The answer came 2 days later, when Eleanor discovered a notice from the county tax assessor warning of impending penalties for unpaid property taxes. According to the records, Blackstone hadn't paid in 8 months, despite ledger entries indicating the payments had been made. "He was embezzling more systematically than we realized," Parker said grimly when she showed him the notice. "Marking payments in our ledgers, but never actually sending the funds." "We need to conduct a full audit," Eleanor advised. "I can't trust any of the existing records now." Parker's jaw tightened. "Do it. Whatever resources you need, they're yours." The audit consumed another 2 weeks of intensive work. Eleanor created new ledgers from scratch, verifying every transaction against bank records, receipts, and physical evidence. The picture that emerged was troubling. Hollis had been skimming funds for at least a year, possibly embezzling over $2,000 through false supply orders, tax payment diversions, and payroll manipulation. "We should notify the sheriff," Eleanor insisted when she presented her findings. "This is criminal activity." Parker's expression was conflicted. "Hollis is in Denver now, possibly headed to California. The local sheriff has no jurisdiction there. And frankly, he's more concerned with saloon brawls than financial crimes. Then we should engage a Pinkerton agent. The agency specializes in tracking such criminals across state lines." "Perhaps," Parker studied the meticulous documentation she'd assembled, "but our immediate priority must be stabilizing the mine's finances. These tax penalties could cripple our operations if not addressed immediately." Eleanor had anticipated this concern. "I've already drafted a payment plan to propose to the assessor with an initial good faith payment to demonstrate our intention to resolve the matter. Based on current production and operating costs, we can clear the debt in 3 months without disrupting operations." Parker looked at her with undisguised admiration. "You've exceeded every expectation, Miss Hayes. I'm beginning to think Crawford's rejection was the most fortunate turn of events in Blackstone's history." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. Over the past month, Eleanor had developed a deep respect for Gabriel Parker's integrity and vision. Unlike William Crawford's pompous self-importance, Parker's authority stemmed from genuine capability and principled leadership. He consulted her opinions on business matters without condescension and implemented her suggestions without needing to claim them as his own ideas. Their working relationship had settled into a productive pattern. Early mornings found them reviewing the previous day's operations over coffee in the office. Throughout the day, they addressed issues independently in their respective domains, reconvening in late afternoon to align their efforts. Often, these afternoon meetings extended into early evening discussions about future possibilities for the mine. It was during one such evening conversation, 6 weeks after her arrival, that Parker first mentioned partnership. "The Hamilton Group has responded favorably to your letter," he said, handing her their telegraph. "They're sending a representative next month to discuss investment terms." Eleanor scanned the message, pleased her carefully worded explanation. Had reopened the opportunity. This could fund the expansion without straining our operating capital. Their terms remain generous. Indeed. Parker studied her thoughtfully. "Which raises an important consideration. Your trial period ends next week. I believe we should discuss a more permanent arrangement. I would be pleased to continue as business manager, Mr. Parker. The position has proven both challenging and satisfying. I'm proposing more than continued employment, Miss Hayes." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I'm suggesting a junior partnership, 10% ownership stake in the Blackstone operation with commensurate profit sharing." Eleanor stared at him, certain she'd misunderstood. "Partnership, but I have no capital to invest." "You've already invested something more valuable than money. Skill and dedication that saved this operation from potential ruin. The embezzlement might have continued undetected until Blackstone faced bankruptcy." He slid a document across the desk. "I've had my attorney draw up the preliminary agreement. Review it carefully, of course." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the papers. Women rarely owned property in their own names, let alone held partnership in mining operations. "This is most unexpected, Mr. Parker. The mining industry rewards those who recognize the value others miss, Miss Hayes, whether in ore veins or human capability." His expression softened slightly. "Consider it carefully. We can discuss any questions or concerns you have tomorrow." That night in her cabin, Eleanor read the partnership agreement 3 times by lamplight. The terms were straightforward and fair: 10% ownership in exchange for continued management of business operations with provisions for profit sharing, decision input, and clearly defined responsibilities. The arrangement could be dissolved by either party with appropriate notice and compensation. As she prepared for bed, a knock at her door startled her. Visitors after dark were unusual. At Blackstone, where work shifts and sleep schedules were strictly respected, wrapping her robe tightly, she approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" "Mrs. Jenkins, Miss Hayes. I apologize for the late hour, but I have urgent news." Eleanor opened the door to find the foreman's wife on her porch, expression troubled. "What's happened?" "There's talk in town. William Crawford has been making accusations about you and Mr. Parker. Improper arrangements, he calls it. He's written to the bank in Denver, suggesting the Blackstone operation is financially unsound due to questionable management decisions." Mrs. Jenkins twisted her hands anxiously. "My sister works at the hotel. She overheard Crawford telling associates he intends to force Parker to sell by undermining his credit and reputation." "I see." Eleanor's mind raced with implications. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mrs. Jenkins. Does Mr. Parker know?" Jenkins is telling him now. She hesitated. "Miss Hayes, people here respect Mr. Parker. What he's built means jobs and stability for families like ours. Crawford's always been jealous of Blackstone's success. His own mine has half the output despite twice the investment, but using you to create scandal, it's unconscionable." After Mrs. Jenkins departed, Eleanor sat at her small writing desk, considerations swirling through her mind. Crawford's tactics were personal and vindictive. By accepting Parker's partnership offer, she would further inflame the situation, potentially damaging Blackstone's standing with conservative investors. But refusing the offer out of fear would betray everything she valued about her new life in the West. the autonomy, the respect earned through capability, the chance to build something meaningful. Dawn found her still at the desk, decision made, a carefully drafted counter-proposal before her. When she arrived at the office, Parker was already there, expression grim as he read a letter bearing the Denver bank's letterhead. "I assume you've heard about Crawford's allegations," he said. "Without preamble, Mrs. Jenkins informed me last night." Eleanor placed her document on the desk. "I've reviewed your partnership offer, Mr. Parker. I'd like to propose a slight modification." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "You still wish to proceed, despite Crawford's attempts to create scandal?" "Crawford rejected me for being too independent. I won't now reject a legitimate opportunity for the same quality he found so objectionable." She indicated her proposal. "I suggest 15% partnership rather than 10%, with the additional 5% to be earned through successful expansion of operations over the next year. I've outlined specific production and efficiency targets that would trigger the increase." Parker stared at her, then let out a surprised laugh. "Most people would be requesting less visibility, not greater commitment, under these circumstances." "I'm not most people, Mr. Parker, and I believe the best response to attempts at intimidation is to proceed with even greater determination." She met his gaze steadily. "Crawford's tactics reveal his character, not ours. I won't allow his pettiness to determine my future any more than I allowed his rejection to define my worth." Parker studied her counterproposal, a slow smile spreading across his face. 15%, contingent on performance metrics of your own design. You drive a harder bargain than the Hamilton Group, Miss Hayes. Consider it incentive alignment, Mr. Parker. My success becomes inseparable from Blackstone's, precisely what any good partnership should establish." He extended his hand across the desk. "We have an agreement then, partner." As they shook hands, Eleanor felt a profound sense of vindication. 2 months ago, she'd arrived in Black Ridge as a mail-order bride, valued primarily for domestic potential. Today, she stood as a businesswoman claiming her rightful place through demonstrated capability. The path ahead would undoubtedly hold challenges. Crawford's attempts to undermine them were just beginning. Conservative elements in town already viewed her position with suspicion. The mining industry itself remained overwhelmingly male-dominated and resistant to change. But for perhaps the first time in her life, Eleanor Hayes faced the future without constraints imposed by others' limited expectations. The independence that William Crawford had found so objectionable had become her greatest asset, recognized and valued by a man whose vision extended beyond conventional boundaries. As if reading her thoughts, Parker said quietly, "We're going to face considerable opposition, you realize. Not everyone is ready for a female mine owner, even a partial one." Eleanor smiled, determination settling into certainty. "Then they'll simply have to adapt, Mr. Parker. The world rarely progresses by waiting for everyone to be ready for change." News of Eleanor's partnership in the Blackstone mine spread through Black Ridge with the speed of a tunnel collapse. By midday, Parker's attorney had filed the official documentation with the county clerk, making the arrangement a matter of public record. By evening, the town hummed with speculation, judgment, and in some quarters, outrage. Eleanor experienced the first direct confrontation the following morning when she visited the general store to arrange for office supplies. Mrs. Perkins, the store owner's wife, had always been coolly professional during Eleanor's previous visits. Today, the woman didn't bother disguising her disapproval. "We don't have an account for you personally, Miss Hayes," Mrs. Perkins said, when Eleanor presented her Blackstone requisition form. "Our arrangement is with Mr. Parker." "This is a Blackstone mine purchase," Eleanor explained patiently. "As you Can see the form bears our company letterhead and my signature as authorized partner. Mrs. Perkins sniffed. My husband deals with Mr. Parker directly on business matters. Perhaps you should return with him. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. Mrs. Perkins, this document authorizes a business transaction between Perkins General Store and Blackstone Mine. My signature carries the full legal authority of the company. If you prefer to lose Blackstone's considerable business over personal objections to my position, that is certainly your choice. The woman's eyes widened at the calm ultimatum. Blackstone's monthly orders represented a significant portion of the store's income. I'll need to consult with my husband. Of course. While you do, I'll make a list of alternative suppliers in Denver who might accommodate our needs. Eleanor removed a small notebook from her handbag and began writing with deliberate precision. 10. Minutes later, Eleanor departed with the ordered supplies and a tense but completed transaction. As she arranged for the items to be loaded into the Blackstone wagon, she noticed William Crawford watching from across the street, his expression a mixture of displeasure and calculation. "Miss Hayes," he called, crossing toward her. "A moment of your time." Eleanor steeled herself for the encounter. Crawford had altered his appearance since their brief acquaintance. His beard was now more carefully trimmed, his attire even more ostentatiously expensive. The changes only emphasized the artifice of his self-presentation. "Mr. Crawford." She acknowledged him with a brief nod. "I'm rather pressed for time. I'll be direct then." He lowered his voice, though his tone remained pompous. "This arrangement, with Parker, it's causing considerable talk. For your own reputation, you should reconsider." "My reputation is built on competence and integrity, Mr. Crawford. Neither is compromised by business partnership." His expression hardened. "Don't be naive. A single woman living at a mining camp, now claiming ownership. People draw conclusions. The respectable families of Black Ridge are already limiting contact. You're isolating yourself socially." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "I came to Colorado for opportunity, not social acceptance. If you're concerned about propriety, perhaps consider how your public campaign against Blackstone reflects on your own character." "I'm protecting my investments." Crawford's pretense of concern vanished. "Parker's progressive notions may play well with Eastern investors looking to appear forward-thinking, but they undermine the established order here. Mining communities function through clear hierarchies and traditional roles. Yet Blackstone consistently outproduces the Silverton mine, despite your larger initial investment and more traditional approach," Eleanor observed. "Perhaps the established order deserves reconsideration." Crawford's face flushed. "Parker got lucky with his initial strike, but luck doesn't sustain operations. When the Hamilton Group learns about his unorthodox management decisions, including making his mail-order bride reject a business partner, they'll reconsider their investment." "The Hamilton Group values results above convention, Mr. Crawford. Our production reports and financial statements will speak more persuasively than gossip." Eleanor nodded to Jenkins, who had finished loading the supplies. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Blackstone's business requires my attention." As the wagon pulled away, Eleanor's composed expression masked genuine concern. Crawford's mention of the Hamilton Group wasn't idle talk. If he actively interfered with their pending investment, Blackstone's expansion plans could be jeopardized. The mine's operations were stable, but not inexhaustible. Without development of the Northern Tunnel, production would eventually decline. Back at Blackstone, she found Parker in intense discussion with Sullivan and the other engineers over a new ore sample. The excitement in their voices told her something significant had been discovered. "Silver content far exceeds our expectations," Parker explained when she joined them. This sample came from the exploratory shaft in the North Tunnel, exactly where we hope to expand with the Hamilton investment. Sullivan, whose initial resistance to Eleanor had gradually transformed into grudging respect, pointed to crystalline structures in the rock. See these formations? They typically indicate a larger deposit nearby. If the Hamilton funding comes through for proper expansion, we could be looking at a major strike. This timing is fortuitous, Eleanor said, meeting Parker's gaze. But we may face additional challenges with Hamilton. Crawford directly referenced their investment during our encounter in town. Parker's expression darkened. What exactly did he say? Eleanor recounted the conversation precisely, including Crawford's implied threat to undermine their arrangement with the investors. He's clearly attempting to interfere. We should prepare contingencies in case the Hamilton representative arrives. With preconceptions. Agreed. Parker glanced at Sullivan. Continue the exploratory work, but quietly. No discussions of the findings outside our immediate team. After the engineers departed, he turned back to Eleanor. Crawford's becoming more than a nuisance. Jenkins heard rumors he's attempting to purchase adjacent land claims to block our expansion. Can he do that legally? If he files the claims properly, yes. Mining law favors those who stake first, regardless of existing nearby operations. Parker ran a hand through his hair in frustration. The northern expansion is crucial to Blackstone's future. These new samples confirm what I've suspected. We're on the edge of a significant deposit that could sustain operations for years. Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor and Parker worked to solidify Blackstone's position before the Hamilton representative arrived. She prepared comprehensive financial reports documenting the mine's efficiency improvements and profit margins. Parker accelerated the exploratory shaft work, gathering more samples to demonstrate the expansion's potential. Meanwhile, Li Chen proved an unexpected asset in countering Crawford's machinations. His connections among Chinese workers at other mines provided valuable intelligence about Crawford's attempts to purchase surrounding claims. He offered double-standard rates for the northeastern parcel, Chen reported during an evening strategy session in Parker's office. But Liu at the Mercy mine says the owner refused. He's holding out for more or considering other buyers. Which owner is this? Parker asked, marking the parcel on his map. James Harrington, Eleanor supplied, recognizing the name from county records she'd reviewed. Margaret Harrington's husband, Crawford's uncle by marriage. Parker looked up sharply. That complicates matters. Family loyalty might prevail over financial interest. Not necessarily, Eleanor said thoughtfully. According to town records, Harrington filed for separate business interests from Crawford last year. There may be tension we could leverage. Find out what you can, Parker instructed Chen. Discreetly, Chen nodded. The Harrington cook plays mahjong with our laundry workers. I'll ensure the conversation turns appropriately. 3 days before the Hamilton representative's scheduled arrival, Chen's intelligence network delivered crucial information. James Harrington and William Crawford had indeed experienced a significant falling out over a previous mining venture, where Crawford had allegedly mismanaged Harrington's investment. The northeastern parcel remained available, with Harrington specifically reluctant to sell to his nephew-in-law despite the premium offered. We should approach Harrington directly, Eleanor suggested, not to purchase outright, but to propose a joint development arrangement. He maintains ownership while we provide expertise and labor for exploration, with profit sharing on any discoveries. Parker considered the suggestion. It addresses his financial interests while allowing him to rebuff Crawford without seeming petty. But will he even meet with us? Margaret Harrington made her disapproval of our arrangement quite clear. James Harrington is foremost a businessman, Eleanor pointed out. His wife may concern herself with social propriety, but county records show he's developed 3 successful ventures in the past decade. He understands opportunity. The meeting with Harrington was arranged for the following afternoon at his office in town. Eleanor spent the morning preparing materials demonstrating Blackstone's operational efficiency and the geological analysis suggesting the value of coordinated development between the parcels. James Harrington proved to be a sharp contrast to his pompous nephew-in-law. In his 60s, with a weathered face and practical attire that had actually seen use in mine tunnels, he evaluated Parker and Eleanor with shrewd assessment rather than automatic judgment. "I'll be direct," he said after preliminary introductions. "My wife believes your partnership arrangement flouts necessary social conventions. She's not entirely wrong about the importance of stable social structures in frontier communities." Eleanor maintained professional composure. "Mr. Harrington, social structures and business innovations need not be mutually exclusive. Blackstone's success demonstrates the value of recognizing talent regardless of conventional categories." Harrington's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected interest. "Indeed. Your production figures are impressive, Parker. 15% higher yields with lower accident rates than comparable operations. That suggests sound management. Miss Hayes deserves significant credit for our improved efficiency," Parker said. "Her systems for resource allocation and inventory control have reduced waste by nearly 20%. Harrington turned his assessment to Eleanor. "You maintained the books for a family business back east?" "My father's import company, yes. I implemented similar controls there, resulting in improved profitability despite challenging market conditions." Harrington leaned back, studying them both. "And this joint development proposal for my northeastern parcel? Why not simply offer to purchase outright?" Parker explained their reasoning, the geological indications suggesting a vein that crossed property boundaries, the mutual advantage of coordinated rather than competing development, the capital efficiency of shared infrastructure. Throughout the presentation, Eleanor noted Harrington's attention to detail and financial implications. He asked pointed questions about cost projections and risk allocation, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of mining economics despite his less flamboyant demeanor compared to Crawford. "Your proposal has merit," Harrington finally acknowledged. "Crawford offered cash purchase at premium, but his track record managing the Silverton operation doesn't inspire confidence. Joint development with clearly defined parameters might indeed serve both our interests better." They spent the next hour negotiating specific terms, profit percentages, labor contributions, oversight mechanisms, dispute resolution procedures. Eleanor's quick calculations and counter-proposals earned appreciative nods from Harrington, who clearly hadn't expected such financial acuity from a woman regardless of her partnership status. As they prepared to depart with a preliminary agreement in hand, Harrington addressed Eleanor directly. "Miss Hayes, my wife will continue to maintain social distance. It's her way, but in my experience, competence eventually overcomes prejudice in business matters, if not always in drawing rooms. Crawford underestimated you. I won't make the same error." The significance of Harrington's tacit support extended beyond the immediate business arrangement. His position as one of Black Ridge's founding citizens carried weight with other business owners. If James Harrington could engage professionally with the unconventional Blackstone partnership, others might reconsider their resistance. The afternoon before the Hamilton representative's arrival, Eleanor was reviewing final preparations in her office when a commotion outside drew her attention. Hurrying to the window, she saw Jenkins and several miners rushing toward one of the tunnel entrances. The alarm bell began ringing, the signal for emergency. She ran from the office, anxiety tightening her chest. The scene at the tunnel entrance was controlled chaos, miners emerging coughing from smoke-filled darkness, others organizing rescue equipment and water buckets. "What happened?" she demanded, spotting Sullivan directing operations. "Explosion in the North Tunnel exploratory shaft," he answered grimly. We're not sure yet if it was a gas pocket or deliberate. Deliberate? Eleanor stared at him in shock. You mean sabotage? Before Sullivan could respond, Parker emerged from the tunnel, supporting an injured worker. His face was streaked with soot, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. Everyone accounted for? He asked Sullivan, helping the injured miner. Onto a stretcher, all present except Chen. He was furthest in, taking samples. Parker immediately turned back toward the tunnel entrance, but Sullivan caught his arm. Too much smoke still. We need to vent it properly, or you'll never reach him. The next hour was agonizing. Eleanor helped organize medical aid for the injured, while ventilation measures cleared enough smoke to permit a rescue attempt. Parker himself led the team back into the tunnel, despite Jenkins' protests about the continuing danger. They emerged 20 minutes later, Parker and another miner carrying the unconscious form of Li Chen between them. The company doctor immediately went to work, administering oxygen and treating a serious gash on Chen's forehead. He was trapped behind a partial collapse, Parker reported, his voice hoarse from smoke. Conscious when we found him but passed out during extraction. The explosion originated at the newest exploration point, exactly where we found the richest samples. Coincidence? Eleanor asked quietly. Parker's expression was grim. The support timbers showed signs of tampering. Someone weakened them deliberately, then likely used a small explosive charge to trigger the collapse. Crawford, she whispered. We can't prove it yet. But the timing, one day before the Hamilton representative arrives, is difficult to dismiss as chance. Parker coughed violently, accepting the water Eleanor handed him. We've lost access to our most promising samples and data for tomorrow's presentation. The doctor approached them after stabilizing Chen. He'll recover, but not quickly. Concussion, smoke inhalation, possibly cracked ribs. He needs complete rest for at least a week. As evening fell, the full impact of the sabotage became clear. The North Tunnel would require extensive repairs before exploration could resume. Critical sample materials had been destroyed in the explosion. Li Chen, whose detailed knowledge of the geological formations had been central to their expansion, proposal was incapacitated. In Parker's office, Eleanor and the mine leadership assessed their position for the Hamilton meeting. We still have the production records and financial statements, Eleanor noted. They demonstrate Blackstone's operational excellence even without the new samples. But the expansion proposal was predicated on the Northern Vein's potential. Sullivan countered. Without those samples and Chen's analysis, we're asking for investment based on significantly less compelling evidence. Parker, cleaned up but obviously exhausted, studied the mine diagrams spread across his desk. We proceed as planned. The Hamilton representative will understand that mining involves setbacks. We present what we have, honestly addressing today's incident without speculation about causes until we have proof. Eleanor remained after the others departed, concerned overriding professional boundaries. You should have the doctor examine you. That smoke exposure. I'm fine, Parker interrupted, though his periodic coughing suggested otherwise. We need to focus on salvaging tomorrow's presentation. Gabriel. She used his given name for the first time, drawing his startled attention. Blackstone's future depends on your leadership. Don't compromise your health needlessly. Something shifted in his expression, recognition of her genuine concern beyond business partnership. An hour's rest then, but we'll need to work through the night reorganizing our proposal. By dawn, they had reconstructed a credible presentation. Eleanor's meticulous financial projections demonstrated Blackstone's capacity for expansion even without the dramatic new samples. Parker's operational plans emphasized the mine's safety record and efficient resource utilization. It wasn't the compelling case they'd originally prepared, but it presented solid business fundamentals that any astute investor would recognize. The Hamilton representative, Edward Thornton, arrived precisely at 10 o'clock. a well-dressed gentleman, whose Boston accent immediately reminded Eleanor of home. His assessment of the Blackstone operation was methodical and thorough, asking pertinent questions about everything from equipment maintenance to worker retention rates. If he had heard Crawford's insinuations about impropriety in the partnership arrangement, he gave no indication. Instead, he engaged with Eleanor directly on financial matters, testing her knowledge with increasingly complex questions about capital allocation and risk management. "Miss Hayes, your projection models are impressively sophisticated," he commented, during their office discussion. "Few mining operations employ such rigorous financial analysis." "Blackstone believes modern mining requires modern business practices," she replied. "The industry's traditional boom or bust cycle can be moderated through proper fiscal management and strategic development." Thornton nodded thoughtfully. "An enlightened perspective. Mr. Parker, your operational innovations similarly reflect forward thinking. The Hamilton Group appreciates partners who balance ambition with sustainability." As they concluded the formal presentation, Parker addressed the tunnel incident directly. "We experienced a setback yesterday that damaged our northern exploration shaft. We're investigating the cause, but wanted to be transparent about the situation." Thornton's expression remained neutral. "Mining has inherent risks. The Hamilton Group evaluates management's response to setbacks as carefully as their celebration of successes. How quickly do you anticipate repairs will restore exploration capabilities?" The directness of the question suggested Thornton was still genuinely considering investment despite the sabotage. Parker outlined the recovery timeline, while Eleanor presented the contingency budget allocations she'd prepared overnight. After Thornton departed for his hotel to consider the proposal overnight, Eleanor and Parker walked slowly back toward the mine offices, both exhausted from the presentation following their sleepless night. "He didn't dismiss us outright," Parker noted. "That's encouraging given yesterday's setback." "Thornton strikes me as a man who evaluates fundamentals rather than appearances," Eleanor agreed. The Hamilton Group's reputation for shrewd but progressive investments aligns with that assessment. Parker stopped walking, turning to face her directly. The afternoon sun highlighted the fatigue in his features, but also the determination that had first drawn her respect. "Whatever Thornton decides, Eleanor, I want you to know that offering you partnership was the best decision I've made for Blackstone. Not despite yesterday's crisis, but especially because of it. Your resilience in reorganizing our entire presentation overnight demonstrated exactly why you belong in this position." The unexpected personal acknowledgement, combined with his continued use of her given name, created a warmth that had nothing to do with business partnership. Before Eleanor could formulate a response that wouldn't betray her growing personal regard, Jenkins approached with urgent news. "Riders coming up the road," the foreman reported. "Crawford and the sheriff, plus 2 others. Parker's expression hardened. "It seems our competition isn't finished yet." Sheriff Donovan was a man whose uniform fit more comfortably than his authority. Elected primarily for his imposing physique rather than any particular aptitude for law enforcement, he typically confined his activities to breaking up saloon brawls and escorting drunks to the town's small jail. His arrival at Blackstone, flanked by Crawford and 2 stern-faced men Eleanor didn't recognize, suggested he'd been persuaded to extend his jurisdiction into more complex matters. "Mr. Parker," the sheriff called as their horses reached the mine yard, "got some questions that need answering." Parker stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Eleanor in a protective gesture she found both unnecessary and oddly touching. "Sheriff Donovan, to what do we owe this official visit?" Crawford dismounted first, his expression smug beneath a pretense of civic concern. There's been an accusation of serious financial impropriety involving Blackstone Mine. Sheriff, Donovan is here to investigate. What accusation exactly? Parker's voice remained even, though Eleanor noted the tension in his shoulders. The sheriff looked uncomfortable, glancing at Crawford before responding. Claim of embezzlement. Former employee named Hollis Fletcher signed a statement saying, "Funds were misappropriated. Says there's evidence in your books." Eleanor stepped forward, professional indignation overriding caution. "That's preposterous. Hollis Fletcher was himself embezzling from Blackstone for months. We've documented his theft extensively." "Convenient accusation against a man who's not here to defend himself," Crawford remarked. "Sheriff, I believe an examination of the Blackstone financial records is in order. These gentlemen," he indicated the two strangers, "are independent accountants from Denver who can review the books properly." Parker's expression remained impassive, but Eleanor caught the slight narrowing of his eyes that signaled controlled anger. "Sheriff, this is clearly an attempt to disrupt our operations during a crucial negotiation period. Mr. Crawford has made no secret of his desire to undermine Blackstone's relationship with potential investors." "Got no interest in your business." "Rivalries," Donovan replied, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "But a formal complaint's been filed. Need to follow procedure." "The complaint is based on statements from a man who fled the territory after stealing from this company," Eleanor interjected. "I've reconstructed the accounts completely since arriving. Every transaction is documented and legitimate." Crawford's smile didn't reach his eyes. "If that's the case, Miss Hayes, surely you won't object to independent verification, unless there's something in those ledgers you'd prefer remains hidden." The insinuation was clear and strategically timed. With the Hamilton representatives still considering their investment proposal, any suggestion of financial irregularity could prove disastrous. Refusing examination would appear suspicious, while allowing these clearly biased, independent accountants access to their records risked deliberate misinterpretation. Parker turned to Eleanor, their eyes meeting in silent communication. After a moment's consideration, she gave a slight nod. They had nothing to hide. Her reconstruction of the accounts had been meticulous precisely because she'd anticipated potential scrutiny. "We have no objection to proper financial review," Parker told the sheriff. "However, I insist on conditions to ensure actual independence. These gentlemen," he gestured to Crawford's accountants, "are unknown to us and arrived with a party clearly hostile to Blackstone's interests." "Reasonable precaution," agreed a new voice from the path leading toward the mine offices. Edward Thornton approached, his expression revealing he'd overheard the exchange. "Perhaps I might offer a solution." All eyes turned to the Hamilton representative, whose unexpected appearance shifted the dynamic immediately. Crawford's confident expression faltered as he recognized someone whose financial authority likely exceeded his own. "Mr. Thornton," Parker acknowledged him with evident relief. "I believed you'd returned to town." "I was discussing some technical questions with your head engineer," Thornton explained. "I couldn't help overhearing this conversation." He turned to the sheriff. "Edward Thornton, representing the Hamilton Investment Group. We're currently evaluating Blackstone Mine for potential partnership." Sheriff Donovan straightened, clearly recognizing the significance of the Hamilton Group's involvement. "Mr. Thornton, didn't mean to interrupt business dealings." "No interruption at all," Thornton assured him smoothly. "In fact, this situation aligns with our standard due diligence process. The Hamilton Group always conducts independent financial verification before finalizing investments." He gestured to Crawford's accountants. "These gentlemen work for whom?" "Precisely." Crawford hesitated, his plan clearly derailed by Thornton's intervention. "They're respected professionals from Denver." "Excellent. Then they won't object to working alongside the Hamilton Group's own financial examiner, who happens to be staying at the same hotel in Black Ridge." Between these gentlemen and our representative, we can ensure a thorough and truly independent review of Blackstone's accounts. Thornton's tone was pleasant but firm, effectively neutralizing Crawford's strategy. The sheriff, visibly relieved to have the situation resolved without his further involvement, nodded agreement. Sounds proper. Examination can proceed tomorrow with all parties present. Crawford could hardly object without revealing his true intentions. Of course, he managed, though his expression suggested this outcome was far from what he'd planned. Transparency benefits everyone. As the sheriff and Crawford's party departed, Thornton turned to Parker and Eleanor with a contemplative expression. Interesting timing for financial accusations. Crawford has been attempting to undermine Blackstone since he learned of our partnership arrangement, Eleanor explained, still processing how effectively Thornton had diffused the situation. This is merely his latest tactic. Miss Hayes rejected Crawford's offer of marriage, Parker added. Shortly afterward, I offered her a business partnership based on her financial expertise. His pride hasn't recovered from either development. Thornton's eyebrows rose slightly. I see that explains certain whispers in town. He glanced between them thoughtfully. The Hamilton Group evaluates investments based on viability and management capability, not local social dynamics. However, understanding all factors affecting an operation is part of our process. Crawford's interference is a factor we're actively managing, Eleanor assured him. Today's incident with the sheriff is unlikely to be his last attempt, but we've anticipated most potential avenues of attack. Most, but perhaps not all, Parker admitted, his expression turning serious. Mr. Thornton, I believe yesterday's tunnel explosion was sabotage, not an accident. We can't prove Crawford's involvement yet, but the timing and target, our most promising expansion area just before your visit, suggest deliberate interference. Thornton absorbed this information with professional calm. Serious accusation. Do you have any evidence? The support timbers showed signs of tampering, Parker replied. We're conducting a thorough investigation, but the damage itself is complicated. Evidence collection. I understand. Thornton straightened his jacket, a gesture Eleanor recognized from Boston businessmen preparing to deliver a significant assessment. Mining is both a technical and human enterprise. The quality of ore matters, but so does the character of those extracting it. His gaze moved deliberately between Parker and Eleanor. I've seen enough to form preliminary conclusions about Blackstone's management. Tomorrow's financial review will either confirm or challenge those impressions. After Thornton departed, Parker and Eleanor returned to the office to prepare for the next day's examination. The accounts were in impeccable order thanks to Eleanor's systematic reconstruction, but they needed to organize supporting documentation for every transaction Crawford's accountants might question. Thornton's intervention was fortunate, Eleanor noted, as they sorted through receipt files. Having the Hamilton Group's examiner present neutralizes whatever instructions Crawford might have given his men. Parker nodded, though his expression remained troubled. Crawford miscalculated by bringing the sheriff here while Thornton was still on the property. But he's not finished. Tomorrow's review is merely one obstacle. You're concerned about something specific, Eleanor observed, recognizing the particular tension in his posture. What aren't you telling me? He hesitated, then sighed. Jenkins discovered more evidence of tampering in the tunnel. The explosive used matches a type specific to the Silverton mine, Crawford's operation. That's direct evidence of his involvement in the sabotage. Evidence, but not proof that would stand in court. We can't establish a chain of possession. Who had access to the explosives? Who placed them in our tunnel? Parker ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Crawford's careful to maintain distance between himself and any questionable activities. He employs men willing to take risks for proper compensation, but none who would implicate him directly if caught. Eleanor considered this assessment. Then we need to change our approach. Instead of reacting to each attack, we should address the root of his motivation, which is control, Eleanor said simply. Crawford's actions have been consistent since I arrived in Black Ridge. His rejection of me as a bride when I showed independence, his response to our partnership, the attempts to block expansion through land acquisition, even sabotage, all reflect a man who cannot tolerate developments outside his control. Accurate analysis, but how does it help us counter his next move? Eleanor smiled. We give him something he can control, something that satisfies his need for public victory, while securing what Blackstone actually needs. They worked late into the night, developing a strategy that acknowledged Crawford's psychological motivations while protecting Blackstone's essential interests. By morning, they had prepared not only the financial records for examination, but also a contingency plan should the expected investment from the Hamilton Group become compromised. The financial review proceeded more smoothly than anticipated. Thornton's examiner, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Constance Wheeler, who had apparently been disguised as Thornton's secretary during their initial meetings, proved formidable. Her presence clearly discomfited Crawford's accountants, whose attempts to question certain legitimate expenses were systematically dismantled by her precise knowledge of mining operations accounting. These ventilation system upgrades appear excessive, one of Crawford's men suggested, indicating an expenditure that represented significant improvement over industry standards. Blackstone's accident rate is 30% below comparable operations. Mrs. Wheeler responded before Eleanor could defend the expense. Proper ventilation prevents both immediate disasters and long-term health complications among workers. The investment demonstrates prudent safety prioritization rather than excess. By midday, even Crawford's accountants were forced to acknowledge that Blackstone's books showed no evidence of embezzlement or financial impropriety. If anything, the examination revealed operational efficiency and fiscal discipline that impressed. Thornton, visibly, your reconstruction of these accounts shows remarkable thoroughness, Miss Hayes, he commented as the review concluded. Few mining operations maintain such precise records. Precision prevents both error and misconduct, Eleanor replied. Blackstone believes transparency serves long-term interests better than momentary convenience. That afternoon, Crawford appeared at the mine office alone, his expression a mixture of frustration and calculation. Parker received him in the main office with Eleanor present, a deliberate statement that partnership decisions would be made jointly. Your accountants found no irregularities, Parker stated without preamble. Sheriff Donovan has been informed. I trust this concludes your concerns about Blackstone's financial management. Crawford waved this aside impatiently. A preliminary examination, more thorough investigation, might reveal deeper issues. The Hamilton Group's examiner seemed quite satisfied with the depth of review, Eleanor noted. Their standards for investment, due diligence, are notably rigorous. Crawford's jaw tightened at the reminder of his failed strategy. The Hamilton investment isn't finalized. There are other factors they'll consider beyond bookkeeping. Indeed, Parker agreed. Which is why Miss Hayes and I have been discussing a proposition that might benefit all parties. Crawford's suspicion was evident, but curiosity prevailed. What proposition? A cooperative agreement regarding the northeastern expansion, Eleanor explained. We've secured joint development rights with James Harrington for his parcel. We propose including Silverton Mine in a three-way development consortium for the Northern Ridge. The suggestion clearly caught Crawford off guard. Consortium? What exactly would that entail? Parker outlined the framework. Shared infrastructure. costs, coordinated tunnel development to maximize efficiency, proportional profit distribution based on investment contribution. The arrangement would give Crawford partial involvement in the expansion without ceding control of Blackstone's core operations. Harrington agreed to this, Crawford asked skeptically. Contingent on all parties signing legally binding non-interference agreements, Eleanor confirmed. No more sabotage attempts, no more allegations to undermine any participant's financing or operations. Crawford's expression revealed he understood the implication. They had evidence of his involvement in the tunnel explosion. These are serious accusations. Not accusations, Parker corrected. Contingencies. The consortium agreement establishes penalties for any action that damages collective interests. All parties would be equally bound. Eleanor watched Crawford calculate his options. The consortium offered him public association with what promised to be a profitable expansion, potentially saving face after his failed attempts to block Blackstone. However, it also required abandoning his campaign to undermine their operation and accepting their legitimate partnership. I'd need to review the specific terms, Crawford finally said, and consult my attorneys. Of course, Eleanor agreed. We've prepared a preliminary framework document for your consideration. She handed him the proposal they'd drafted overnight. The Hamilton Group has expressed interest in funding the consortium approach, seeing it as a risk mitigation strategy that improves overall investment potential. This was a calculated exaggeration. They had mentioned the possibility to Thornton only briefly, though he had acknowledged its potential merit. Crawford didn't need to know the idea's preliminary status. After Crawford departed with the proposal, Parker turned to Eleanor with a mixture of admiration and amusement. Cooperative agreement. Brilliant misdirection. He thinks we're offering compromise from weakness when actually we're securing exactly what we wanted. Men like Crawford need to believe they're winning, Eleanor observed. The consortium gives him that impression while binding him to legal constraints that protect our interests. His pride gets public satisfaction while our operations gain protection. It's still remarkable that you'd suggest including him after everything he's done, Parker said, studying her with curiosity. Many would seek revenge rather than strategic accommodation. Eleanor considered this assessment. Revenge is emotionally satisfying but rarely profitable. The consortium approach secures Hamilton's investment by reducing development risks, neutralizes Crawford as an active threat, and actually improves Blackstone's expansion efficiency through shared infrastructure costs. That it allows Crawford to save face is merely a practical consideration, not mercy. Parker smiled. You continue to impress, Eleanor Hayes. Crawford rejected you for independence of mind, yet that same quality has now outmaneuvered him completely. The following morning brought a decisive development. Thornton arrived at Blackstone with formal confirmation. The Hamilton Group was prepared to invest in the expansion project under certain conditions. Primary among these was implementation of the consortium approach Eleanor had proposed, which Thornton's superiors viewed as an elegant solution to the territorial competition that had historically undermined mining profitability in the region. Consolidation of complementary resources with maintained operational independence, Thornton explained. It's a model the Hamilton Group has supported successfully in manufacturing contexts. Applying it to mining represents innovation we're eager to associate with. The investment would provide capital for Blackstone's planned expansion, while establishing a framework that effectively neutralized Crawford's ability to interfere without costly consequences to himself. It was, as Eleanor had envisioned, a solution that addressed underlying motivations rather than merely reacting to symptoms. As they finalized preliminary agreement terms with Thornton, a messenger arrived from town with news that shifted the dynamic yet again. Crawford had suffered a minor but dramatic accident. His horse had thrown him on the main street, resulting in a broken arm and considerable public embarrassment. More significantly, the incident had occurred as he departed from an extended meeting with James Harrington, where witnesses reported hearing raised voices before Crawford stormed out in evident agitation. "It seems Uncle James rejected his attempt to circumvent our joint development agreement," Eleanor surmised. "Crawford's pride has suffered multiple blows in rapid succession." Parker frowned. "Which might make him more dangerous. Wounded pride can provoke irrational actions or create opportunity for genuine resolution," Thornton suggested. "My experience suggests men like Crawford calculate cost against benefit. If the consortium offers his most viable path to success while preserving some dignity, rational self-interest may prevail over vendetta." Eleanor considered both perspectives. "We proceed with the consortium framework, but maintain vigilance. Crawford has demonstrated both persistence and creativity in his opposition." That evening, as they celebrated the Hamilton Group's preliminary investment commitment with a small gathering for Blackstone's management team, Eleanor found a moment of quiet reflection on the mine office porch. The sunset painted the mountains in dramatic orange and purple, a fitting backdrop for contemplating the remarkable journey from rejected bride to mining investor in just 2 months. Parker joined her, offering a cup of coffee as he leaned against the porch railing. "A penny for your thoughts, partner. I was reflecting on unexpected paths," she admitted. "Had Crawford found me suitably docile as a potential wife, I'd now be managing his household rather than helping direct a mining operation with Hamilton. Group investment, a significant loss for the mining industry," Parker noted with a smile. "And for Blackstone specifically." "For me as well," Eleanor acknowledged. "This partnership has allowed me to apply capabilities that would have remained dormant in a conventional marriage." Parker studied her in the fading light. "The partnership has evolved beyond my initial conception. Your management of the Crawford situation demonstrated strategic thinking I hadn't anticipated." "We complement each other's strengths," Eleanor observed. "Your operational expertise and vision combined with my financial and organizational systems." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only when Sullivan approached with news that Li Chen's condition had improved significantly. The doctor now expected full recovery within weeks rather than months. As the celebration continued inside, Eleanor remained on the porch a moment longer, savoring the hard-won victories of the day. Crawford had unwittingly given her the greatest gift possible when he deemed her too independent for marriage. That rejection had opened the path to partnership, respect, and the chance to build something meaningful through her own capabilities rather than through connection to a husband. The future still held challenges. Implementing the consortium would require diplomatic skill, expanding operations would test their management systems, and Black Ridge society would continue struggling with their unconventional arrangement. But Eleanor faced these prospects with confidence rather than apprehension. Independence, she reflected, wasn't about refusing connection or cooperation. It was about entering relationships from a position of choice and strength rather than necessity and subordination. Crawford had failed to understand this distinction. Parker had recognized and valued it. The difference defined everything about her new life at Blackstone Mine. The weeks following the Hamilton Group's investment commitment brought transformation to Blackstone Mine. Construction crews expanded existing facilities, while engineers mapped the Northern Tunnel's continuation through the joint development area. The consortium agreement, finalized after tense but productive negotiations, established clear boundaries and responsibilities among Blackstone, Silverton, and Harrington's interests. Crawford, his arm still in a sling from his fall, had ultimately recognized the financial logic of cooperation, though his manner remained coldly formal whenever interaction with Eleanor or Parker proved necessary. The public narrative that emerged carefully cultivated by Eleanor through strategic conversations with influential townspeople, positioned the consortium as Crawford's magnanimous initiative to promote regional development, allowing him to save face while binding him to terms that protected Blackstone's core interests. For Eleanor, this period brought new challenges beyond operational expansion. The Hamilton investment had attracted attention throughout Colorado Territory's mining community, bringing visitors from Denver, Central City, and even San Francisco to observe the innovative management approaches being implemented at Blackstone. "The Collins Mining Journal wants an interview," Parker informed her one morning, placing a telegram on her desk. "Specifically with you about financial systems integration across the consortium properties." Eleanor looked up from the expansion budget she was reviewing, surprised. "Me specifically, not the general management team?" "Apparently your reputation has spread. According to this, several mining operations have reported improved efficiency after implementing variations of the inventory control systems you designed." Parker seemed both proud and amused. "You're becoming something of a frontier business celebrity, Miss Hayes." She accepted the telegram, scanning its contents with a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal discomfort. Public attention had never been her objective, merely effective systems and proven results. This could be beneficial for Blackstone's standing, though I imagine certain elements in town will find it further evidence of inappropriate ambition. Those certain elements have been notably quieter since the Hamilton Investment and Consortium Agreement, Parker observed. Success tends to transform inappropriate ambition into admirable initiative in public perception. Eleanor had indeed noticed subtle shifts in the town's response to her position. Mrs. Perkins, at the general store, now processed Blackstone requisitions without comment. Several business owners had approached her with questions about record-keeping, improvements for their own operations. Even Margaret Harrington had acknowledged her with a stiff nod during a chance encounter at the post office. Hardly warm acceptance, but a significant change from previous pointed snubs. The most meaningful transformation, however, had occurred within Blackstone itself. The mine's workforce, initially uncertain about taking direction from a woman, had gradually recognized Eleanor's contributions to their stability and safety. Improved inventory systems meant critical supplies never ran short. Reorganized financial management had stabilized cash flow, ensuring payroll met even during production fluctuations. When Eleanor implemented a new accident compensation program that provided continued partial wages during recovery periods, loyalty among the miners solidified decisively. Li Chen, fully recovered from his injuries sustained in the explosion, had been promoted to assistant engineer based on his demonstrated capabilities rather than seniority. The precedent encouraged other workers to develop specialized skills, knowing advancement at Blackstone depended on merit rather than background or connections. "The Northern Tunnel development is progressing faster than projected," Chen reported during the weekly management meeting, indicating survey markers on the expanded mine maps. "The geological formations match our predictions, suggesting the main vein extends at least 800 feet beyond our previous estimates." Sullivan nodded agreement. "Silver content remains consistently high in the new samples. If these conditions persist through the Harrington parcel, production could increase by 40% once full operations are established." Parker turned to Eleanor. "Can our processing capacity handle that increase, or will we need additional equipment investment?" "I've anticipated expansion needs in the capital allocation plan," she replied, consulting her notes. "Phase 1 of processing upgrades is already underway. Phase 2 would commence when tunnel development reaches the 500-foot marker, ensuring equipment is operational when the new extraction areas are ready." The seamless integration of operational planning and financial management reflected their evolving partnership. Over the months since her arrival, Eleanor and Parker had developed a professional rhythm that leveraged their complementary expertise without requiring explicit discussion of boundaries or authorities. They simply functioned as extensions of a unified leadership approach, each trusting the other's judgment in their respective domains. This professional harmony had gradually developed personal dimensions that neither had openly acknowledged. Eleanor found herself noticing details beyond business relevance, the way Parker's expression softened when visiting injured workers, his patience explaining technical concepts to new miners, the quiet determination with which he maintained Blackstone's progressive policies despite community resistance. For his part, Parker increasingly sought her perspective on matters beyond financial concerns, valuing her insights into personnel dynamics and strategic planning. Their evolving connection remained unstated, yet increasingly evident to those around them. Jenkins had taken to discreetly withdrawing when their discussion of business matters extended into more personal territories. Mrs. Jenkins had subtly reorganized evening meal deliveries to encourage them to share dinner on nights when work kept them at the office past normal hours. Even Sullivan, not known for interpersonal awareness, had begun routing non-urgent questions through other channels when he found them in conversation. The Collins Mining Journal interview brought these unspoken dynamics into sharper relief. The reporter, a perceptive woman named Charlotte Wilson, who had established her journalistic credentials covering mining developments throughout the West, arrived with a photographer and list of prepared questions about Blackstone's operations. What began as a technical discussion about financial systems and consortium management, however, evolved into a more nuanced exploration of leadership philosophy. "Your partnership structure is highly unusual in this industry," Wilson noted, after Eleanor had explained the efficiency improvements achieved through their integrated approach. "What made you decide to offer Miss Hayes partnership rather than conventional employment, Mr. Parker?" Parker considered the question seriously. Mining operations traditionally separate technical decisions from financial management, with the latter considered a secondary support function. "I recognize that approach wastes potential by maintaining artificial hierarchies instead of leveraging complementary expertise." He glanced at Eleanor. Miss Hayes demonstrated exceptional capability. Partnership acknowledged her contributions would be fundamental to Blackstone's success, not merely supportive. "And you, Miss Hayes," Wilson turned to Eleanor. "You arrived in Blackridge expecting a very different future. Was the transition to business leadership difficult?" "Less difficult than conforming to expectations that denied my natural capabilities would have been," Eleanor replied carefully. "The skills required for effective business management, organizational discipline, strategic thinking, careful resource allocation are not inherently gendered, despite social conventions suggesting otherwise." Wilson smiled slightly. "Yet your position has generated considerable controversy locally. How have you managed the social resistance?" "By focusing on results rather than reaction," Eleanor stated. "Effectiveness ultimately speaks more persuasively than conformity. When systems demonstrate consistent improvement, practical benefits eventually outweigh ideological objections." The interview continued for nearly 2 hours, covering everything from specific management innovations to broader perspectives on the mining industry's evolution. Throughout, Wilson's perceptive questions revealed she understood the significance of Blackstone's approach extended beyond operational efficiency to fundamental questions about merit-based advancement and organizational structure. When the formal interview concluded and Wilson's photographer began capturing images of the mine's operations, the reporter spoke privately to Eleanor as they observed Parker discussing tunnel support improvements with the engineering team. "Your partnership is remarkable, and not merely in professional terms," Wilson commented. "I've interviewed dozens of mining operations. The typical dynamic between owners and managers involves careful distance and clear authority boundaries. You and Mr. Parker demonstrate something quite different: genuine collaboration and mutual respect." Eleanor maintained professional composure despite the personal observation. Successful partnership requires trust in each other's judgment and recognition of complementary capabilities. Indeed, Wilson's expression suggested she recognized the deliberately neutral response. The most effective business relationships often evolve beyond their initial parameters, just as the most meaningful personal connections frequently begin with shared purpose rather than conventional expectations. Before Eleanor could formulate an appropriate reply to this rather pointed observation, they were interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. A carriage bearing the Silverton mine emblem pulled into the yard, and from it emerged not William Crawford, but his aunt, Margaret Harrington. The woman's imperious bearing remained unchanged from their previous encounters, but her expression lacked the dismissive contempt she had previously directed toward Eleanor. Instead, she appeared determined but conflicted, suggesting her visit involved matters of significant personal importance. Parker joined them as Margaret approached, his questioning glance to Eleanor confirming he found this visit as surprising as she did. "Mrs. Harrington," he greeted her with professional courtesy, "this is unexpected. How may we assist you?" Margaret surveyed the mine's busy operation, her gaze lingering on the construction underway for the expanded processing facilities. "I require a private conversation with Miss Hayes," she stated without preamble, "on a matter of some delicacy." Parker looked to Eleanor, respecting her authority to accept or decline the request. After a moment's consideration of Margaret's unusual demeanor, Eleanor nodded. "We can speak in my office, Mrs. Harrington." As they walked toward the administration building, Eleanor noted Charlotte Wilson observing the interaction with evident journalistic interest. The reporter's perceptiveness suggested this unexpected encounter might find its way into her article, adding another dimension to Blackstone's public narrative. In the privacy of her office, Margaret Harrington required several moments to organize her thoughts, studying Eleanor with an assessment that seemed more measured than their previous interactions had suggested. "My nephew has not managed the Silverton operation effectively," she finally stated, the admission clearly difficult for her. "James, my husband, has reviewed the consortium agreement thoroughly and believes it represents Silverton's best opportunity to achieve sustainable profitability. William disagrees, seeing it as capitulation rather than strategic cooperation." Eleanor waited, sensing Margaret had not come merely to discuss the mining business she could have addressed with Parker directly. "William's pride has prevented him from acknowledging his management limitations," Margaret continued, her aristocratic bearing momentarily giving way to genuine concern. "James believes Silverton requires significant operational restructuring to benefit properly from the consortium arrangement, specifically implementation of management systems similar to those you've established at Blackstone." Understanding dawned. "You're suggesting Silverton needs my assistance with financial reorganization." "I am acknowledging, Miss Hayes, that your methods have demonstrated effectiveness that transcends my personal opinions about appropriate feminine occupation." The concession seemed physically painful for Margaret to articulate. "William would never directly request your assistance. His pride has already suffered considerably." "So you've come instead," Eleanor observed. "Despite your previous objections to my position here." Margaret's expression tightened. "I maintain that traditional social structures serve important stabilizing functions in frontier communities. However, I am not blind to practical realities. Silverton's financial disorganization threatens the consortium's viability, which affects my husband's interests and, by extension, my family's security." The request represented a remarkable reversal. The woman who had once warned Eleanor about social isolation for accepting Parker's employment now sought her expertise for family, business interests. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "What exactly are you proposing, Mrs. Harrington?" Eleanor asked, maintaining professional focus rather than highlighting the evident contradiction. "Consulting services," Margaret replied stiffly. "Discreet. Assessment of Silverton's financial systems with recommendations for improvement. Implementation would occur through existing Silverton personnel, with your guidance rather than direct intervention, thus preserving the appearance that Mr. Crawford maintains full control while actually implementing necessary changes," Eleanor noted, "an approach that addresses practical needs while accommodating personal pride." Margaret's slight nod acknowledged the accurate assessment. "Precisely. The arrangement would be financially compensated, of course, and conducted with appropriate discretion." Eleanor considered the proposition carefully. Helping Silverton improve its operations would ultimately benefit the consortium as a whole, including Blackstone's interests. The professional challenge of reorganizing a resistant operation appealed to her capabilities, and there was undeniable satisfaction in having Margaret Harrington, of all people, acknowledge her expertise so definitively. "I would need to discuss this with Mr. Parker," she said finally. "Any consulting arrangement would require accommodation within my existing responsibilities." "Of course." Margaret rose to leave, then hesitated. "Miss Hayes, my previous assessment of your situation was perhaps hasty. Your management capabilities are evidently substantial. While I maintain certain reservations about unconventional social arrangements, I can acknowledge when practical results challenge traditional assumptions." Coming from Margaret Harrington, this represented extraordinary concession. Not quite apology, but significant recognition nevertheless. Eleanor accepted it with professional grace rather than personal triumph. Circumstances often reveal capabilities that conventional paths might never have uncovered, Mrs. Harrington. My partnership at Blackstone has certainly proven that principle in my own experience. After Margaret departed, Eleanor found Parker waiting near the office porch, curiosity evident in his expression. Charlotte Wilson had also lingered, clearly hoping to incorporate this unexpected development into her article. "Mrs. Harrington requested my consulting services to improve Silverton's financial systems," Eleanor explained once they were alone in Parker's office. "Apparently, Crawford's management limitations have become evident enough that even family loyalty can't obscure them." Parker's surprise gave way to thoughtful consideration. "Interesting development. Helping Silverton implement better systems would strengthen the consortium overall, potentially increasing collective profitability." He studied her expression. "But there's personal satisfaction in having Margaret Harrington acknowledge your expertise after her previous dismissal of your position. I won't deny a certain vindication," Eleanor admitted, "though professional outcomes remain my primary consideration." "Of course." His slight smile suggested he recognized the human element beneath her professional composure. "The consulting arrangement makes strategic sense, provided it doesn't overextend your capacity, given Blackstone's ongoing expansion. I've considered that. With appropriate scheduling and clear scope limitations, the work could be accommodated, without compromising existing responsibilities." She paused, considering additional implications. "There's another potential benefit. Establishing this professional relationship with Silverton might reduce Crawford's inclination toward further interference. Having acknowledged he needs our expertise, even indirectly through his aunt, makes continued opposition self-defeating." Parker nodded, impressed by her strategic thinking. "You've transformed Crawford from adversary to client without him directly." Acknowledging the shift, masterful approach, Eleanor. The use of her given name had become more frequent in their private conversations, a subtle evolution neither commented upon directly. In this moment, however, the personal address carried additional warmth that transcended professional appreciation. "The consortium was your concept," he continued. "Now you've found a way to strengthen it through direct influence on its weakest component. The Hamilton Group will be extremely pleased with this development." "I should inform Mr. Thornton before rumors reach Denver," Eleanor agreed. Mrs. Wilson seemed quite interested in this unexpected visit. "I suspect it may feature prominently in her article." "Rightfully so. It represents another validation of Blackstone's approach, and specifically your contribution to it." Parker hesitated, then added more personally, "When you arrived in Black Ridge, rejected as unsuitable for conventional expectations, neither of us anticipated how significantly your presence would transform not just Blackstone, but potentially the broader mining community. Life often reveals its most meaningful opportunities through apparent setbacks," Eleanor reflected. "Crawford's rejection created the space for partnership that would never have existed otherwise." As they stood together in the office that had become the heart of their shared enterprise, the mining camp bustling with expansion activity visible through the windows, Eleanor recognized how profoundly her journey had diverged from its original destination. The mail-order bride, seeking security through traditional marriage, had instead discovered independence, respect, and purposeful contribution through business partnership. And perhaps something more developing beneath the professional collaboration. Something neither had expected but both increasingly valued. The path forward remained uncharted in personal terms, but the foundation of mutual respect and shared vision provided solid ground for whatever might develop. "The Hamilton Group's investment review delegation arrives next week," Parker noted. "Returning to business matters, their evaluation of the expansion progress will determine the second phase of funding. The Northern Tunnel development figures should impress them," Eleanor responded, matching his professional focus, "particularly with the new efficiency metrics Chen has documented." Yet beneath this return to operational concerns, something had shifted subtly between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that their partnership continued to evolve beyond its original parameters, just as Charlotte Wilson had perceptively observed. Like the silver veins they extracted from the mountain, this evolution followed its natural course, revealing new value with each layer of development. Crawford had rejected Eleanor for independence that threatened his need for control. Parker had recognized that same quality as essential to genuine partnership in business and perhaps, eventually, beyond. The Collins Mining Journal article appeared 3 weeks later, its impact spreading far beyond Black Ridge. Charlotte Wilson's perceptive reporting had transformed what might have been a technical piece about mining management into a compelling narrative about innovation and changing frontier opportunities. The headline, "Silver Vein Golden Mine, How Blackstone Mine's Unprecedented Partnership Redefines Western Enterprise," immediately captured attention throughout mining communities. Eleanor's consulting work with Silverton Mine had begun discreetly, though Margaret Harrington's presence at Blackstone on multiple occasions inevitably generated local discussion. Crawford maintained careful distance during these consultations, always finding pressing business elsewhere when Eleanor reviewed Silverton's systems with their bookkeeper, a nervous young man whose capabilities exceeded his confidence. "Mr. Evans has a natural aptitude for systematic organization," Eleanor told Parker after her third visit to Silverton. "He simply lacked the authority to implement improved methods against established practices. With Mrs. Harrington's explicit support, he's already restructured their supply tracking to eliminate significant waste. The professional satisfaction of this work was compounded by personal vindication." Margaret Harrington's grudging acknowledgement had evolved into genuine, if formal, respect, as Eleanor's recommendations yielded immediate improvements in Silverton's operations. The more substantive validation, however, came from broader industry recognition following the journal article. Denver Mining Consortium requests your presence as featured speaker at their October convention, Parker announced, handing Eleanor a formal invitation that had arrived in the Morning Post. Full travel expenses provided, plus honorarium. They specifically mention your inventory control systems and cross-property management framework. Eleanor absorbed this unexpected development with measured composure, though her heartbeat quickened at the professional recognition. October is just 6 weeks away. With the Hamilton delegation's second inspection occurring next month, the timing is rather challenging. Professionally inconvenient but strategically valuable, Parker observed. Your presentation would coincide with the next phase of investment discussions. Having Blackstone's management approach showcased at the territory's most prestigious mining convention significantly strengthens our negotiating position. The practical logic was undeniable, yet Eleanor felt uncharacteristic hesitation. Public speaking to industry leaders represents considerable exposure. As a woman in this position, the scrutiny will be especially intense. Parker studied her, with the perceptive attention that had become natural between them. Your capabilities withstood Crawford's attempts at sabotage, Margaret Harrington's social displeasure, and the skepticism of experienced miners. A convention audience seems a lesser challenge by comparison. His confidence warmed her, as it increasingly did. You make a compelling point as usual. I'll accept the invitation and begin preparing appropriate materials. We'll prepare together, he corrected gently. The systems they're interested in reflect our partnership's integrated approach, not isolated innovations. This statement, simple yet profound in its implications, exemplified how their professional relationship had evolved. What had begun as distinct domains of expertise had gradually merged into seamless collaboration, each enhancing the other's contributions rather than merely combining them. The pattern extended beyond business matters, though neither had explicitly acknowledged the personal dimension developing beneath their professional partnership. They had fallen into comfortable routines, morning coffee on the office porch, discussing the day's priorities, shared meals during extended work sessions, evening walks around the property, reviewing expansion progress. These moments increasingly included conversations that had nothing to do with Blackstone operations, childhood memories, books they'd valued, perspectives on everything from architecture to philosophy. The Hamilton delegation seems impressed with the Northern Tunnel progress, Parker commented, as they walked the property one evening after the investors' first day of inspection. The September sunset painted the mountains in dramatic shades, the air carrying the first hint of autumn, a crispness. Their technical questions were gratifyingly specific, Eleanor agreed, particularly regarding the integrated extraction approach across consortium properties. They clearly recognized the efficiency advantages. Parker nodded, though his expression suggested his thoughts had shifted beyond immediate business considerations. After a moment's hesitation, he said quietly, "Their senior representative asked an unexpected personal question during the underground tour." Eleanor glanced at him curiously. "What sort of question?" He inquired about the nature of our partnership. A slight awkwardness colored his typically confident manner. Specifically, whether our obvious compatibility extended beyond professional collaboration. The directness of this revelation created a moment of tension between them, not unpleasant, but charged with unspoken significance. They had both carefully maintained the boundary between their growing personal connection and their established business relationship, neither wanting to jeopardize what they'd built together at Blackstone. "A rather presumptuous inquiry," Eleanor finally responded, her tone deliberately neutral. "Though I suppose our working arrangement does confound conventional categories." "Indeed." Parker hesitated again, then added more personally, I informed him that our partnership functions effectively specifically because it's built on mutual respect rather than prescribed expectations. The future evolution of that partnership remains open to possibilities neither of us might have initially anticipated. The careful phrasing acknowledged what had been developing between them without demanding immediate definition or commitment. It was characteristically considerate, giving Eleanor space to determine her own response without pressure or assumption. Before she could formulate a reply that balanced honesty with appropriate restraint, they were interrupted by Jenkins hurrying up the path with an urgent message. A telegram had arrived from Denver. Emergency meeting of consortium members required immediately due to unexpected regulatory developments affecting joint mining operations. The moment passed, their personal conversation necessarily deferred by pressing business matters. Yet something had shifted. The unspoken understanding between them had been partially articulated, creating space for more direct acknowledgement when circumstances permitted. The regulatory issue proved manageable. A proposed territorial legislation that would have complicated cross-property operations was being revised after industry feedback. The consortium partners, including a notably subdued Crawford, met in Black Ridge to coordinate their response to the revised proposal and ensure their joint interests were properly represented in upcoming territorial deliberations. Eleanor's contribution to this process further cemented her standing among regional mining leaders. A detailed analysis of the legislation's financial implications provided the foundation for the consortium's position paper, demonstrating how certain provisions would undermine operational efficiency, while others encouraged responsible development. Remarkably, thorough assessment, James Harrington commented as the meeting concluded. The Territorial Commissioner specifically requested your participation in next month's Regulatory Review Committee, Miss Hayes. Your reputation as a clear thinker on mining economics has evidently reached Denver. This invitation, unprecedented for a woman in Colorado's mining industry, represented professional recognition that would have been unimaginable when Eleanor first arrived in Black Ridge. From rejected bride to respected industry voice in less than 6 months, her journey demonstrated how artificial social limitations often concealed untapped potential. The evening after the consortium meeting, Eleanor found herself once again walking the property with Parker, both contemplating the rapidly approaching Denver Convention and the continuing expansion of their professional influence. I've been thinking about our conversation before the regulatory crisis interrupted, Parker said, as they reached the overlook point that offered views across the valley, about the nature of our partnership and its potential evolution. Eleanor felt simultaneous anticipation and caution. Their business collaboration had proven extraordinarily successful precisely because it balanced their complementary strengths. Without either dominating, any personal relationship would require similar equilibrium, especially given the societal expectations that would pressure them toward more conventional arrangements. As have I, she acknowledged. Our partnership has been built on mutual respect and recognition of each other's capabilities. Any evolution would need to maintain those essential qualities. Parker turned to face her directly, his expression earnest in the gathering twilight. When you arrived in Black Ridge, rejected by Crawford for independence he found threatening, I recognized that same quality as valuable rather than problematic. I've never regretted that assessment. Nor have I regretted accepting your unexpected business proposition, Eleanor replied, allowing more personal warmth into her tone than their typical professional interactions permitted. It offered a path to applying capabilities that conventional roles would have suppressed. I'm considering another proposition, Parker said quietly. One that would extend our partnership beyond Blackstone's operations while preserving the independence and mutual respect that has made our current arrangement so effective. The moment hung between them, filled with potential transitions neither had directly acknowledged until now. Before Parker could continue, however, a distant shout from the direction of the mine offices interrupted them, Chen rushing toward them with evident urgency. "Fire at Silverton's main processing building," he called as he approached. "Crawford requests immediate assistance from our emergency response team." Their personal conversation necessarily deferred once again. They hurried toward the commotion, responsibilities of leadership taking precedence over individual considerations. Yet as they organized Blackstone's response to their consortium partner's crisis, their instinctive coordination reflected the deep trust and unspoken understanding that had developed between them. Whatever proposition Parker had been about to offer would wait for a more appropriate moment. Their immediate focus belonged to the emergency at hand, another test of the partnership that had transformed not only their individual lives, but the broader mining community they now influenced. The fire at Silverton's processing building proved both a crisis and catalyst. Blackstone's emergency response team, better trained and equipped than most mining operations thanks to Parker's emphasis on safety, helped contain the blaze before it could spread to adjacent structures. Though the processing equipment suffered significant damage, the coordinated effort prevented a total loss. Crawford, standing amid the smoking ruins the following morning, appeared shaken by both the disaster and the swift assistance from operations he had once actively undermined. For perhaps the first time since Eleanor had known him, his typical arrogance gave way to genuine vulnerability. "Parker, Miss Hayes, I owe you my gratitude," he acknowledged stiffly. "Without your team's intervention, Silverton might have been destroyed entirely. The consortium exists precisely for mutual support in difficult circumstances," Eleanor replied, professional rather than triumphant, despite the personal satisfaction of Crawford's acknowledgement. "I've already drafted contingency processing, arrangements utilizing Blackstone's facilities until repairs can be completed." The crisis revealed the true value of the cooperative approach Eleanor had designed. Within days, the consortium partners implemented a temporary operational integration that maintained production across all properties, despite Silverton's damaged facilities. Eleanor's systems, initially resisted by Crawford, but now essential to his mine's survival, enabled seamless resource allocation and record-keeping, despite the complex cross-property arrangements. "Remarkable adaptability," Edward Thornton commented during an emergency visit from the Hamilton Group's Denver office. "Most mining operations would face months of disrupted production after such damage. Your consortium framework has transformed potential disaster into merely an operational challenge." The crisis management solidified Eleanor's reputation beyond even the Mining Journal article's impact. When she arrived in Denver for the October convention, she found herself welcomed, not as a curiosity but as a recognized industry innovator. Her presentation on integrated management systems drew the convention's largest audience, with mining operators from across the territory taking detailed notes on her methods. "The Western Mining Alliance has unanimously approved your election to the Advisory Council," the organization's president informed her at the closing banquet. "Your perspective on operational integration represents the industry's future direction." This professional recognition, gratifying as it was, held secondary importance as Eleanor returned to Black Ridge. Throughout her Denver presentation, her thoughts had frequently returned to the interrupted conversation with Parker on the eve of the Silverton fire. His unspoken proposition had lingered in her mind during their necessarily focused crisis management, creating an undercurrent of anticipation beneath their continued professional collaboration. Parker met her at the station upon her return, his expression revealing both pleasure at her homecoming and something more significant, held in reserve. The convention was evidently a success, he observed as they rode toward Blackstone. The telegram from Thornton mentioned exceptional reception, an unprecedented industry interest. It was gratifying, Eleanor agreed, though somewhat overwhelming to address so many industry leaders directly. Implementing systems is considerably easier than explaining their philosophical underpinnings to skeptical mining operators. Yet you evidently succeeded. His smile reflected genuine pride in her accomplishment. Thornton mentioned multiple operations, requesting consulting arrangements similar to your work with Silverton. The carriage rounded the final bend, revealing Blackstone spread before them, the operation they had built together through complementary expertise and shared vision. In the month since the Silverton fire, the expansion had progressed significantly. New buildings gleamed in the autumn sunshine, and the increased activity throughout the property reflected the consortium's successful adaptation to recent challenges. The Hamilton Group has approved the third phase of investment, Parker informed her as they surveyed the growth from the office porch. Full funding for the northern development, plus additional capital for processing improvements. Their board specifically cited your management framework as decisive in their decision. That's excellent news, Eleanor replied, professional satisfaction momentarily overshadowing the personal questions lingering between them. The geological reports from the latest exploration suggest even greater potential than our initial projections. Parker studied her with the perceptive attention that had become natural between them. You're tired from the journey. We can discuss operational details tomorrow after you've rested. I am somewhat fatigued, she acknowledged, though also eager to resume our normal routine. Denver was illuminating, but Blackstone has become home in a way Boston never truly was. The simple admission revealed more than she had perhaps intended. Parker's expression shifted subtly, recognizing the personal significance beneath her practical statement. I had planned a proper dinner to welcome you back, he said, after a moment. There's something important I've been waiting to discuss since before the Silverton fire interrupted us. That evening, Eleanor found herself in Parker's private quarters, adjacent to the main office building. A comfortable space she had visited occasionally for business discussions, but never for a social occasion. He had arranged a proper dinner, complete with table settings that reflected surprising attention to detail for a man who typically focused on practical matters. The consortium has stabilized remarkably since the fire, he noted as they began their meal. Crawford's resistance has transformed into genuine cooperation, partly from necessity, but increasingly from recognition of mutual benefit. Crisis often clarifies priorities, Eleanor observed. The fire demonstrated the practical value of cooperation more persuasively than any theoretical argument could have. Their conversation flowed naturally through updates on mine operations, the conventions, outcomes, and the expanding influence of their management approach throughout the territory. Gradually, however, the discussion shifted toward more personal territories, addressing the interrupted moment that had lingered unresolved between them. Before the Silverton emergency, Parker said as they finished their meal, I was about to propose an evolution of our partnership. Recent events have only strengthened my conviction regarding its value. Eleanor met his gaze steadily, recognizing the significance of this moment while maintaining her characteristic self-possession. I've been considering that unfinished conversation as well. Parker rose and retrieved a document from his desk, placing it before her. Unlike their previous partnership agreement, this paper bore no formal legal headings or official language. Instead, it contained a simple, personally written proposal in Parker's distinctive handwriting. I'm suggesting a dual partnership, he explained as she read the document. Our business collaboration would continue exactly as established. Equal authority in respective domains, shared decision-making on strategic matters, proportional financial participation. But alongside it, I propose a personal partnership of similar structure. Eleanor looked up from the document, struck by the unusual approach. You're proposing marriage as a parallel partnership rather than replacement of our business arrangement. Precisely. His expression combined certainty with respect for her independent consideration. Traditional marriage would legally subsume your separate identity and authority. I'm proposing instead a personal commitment that preserves the independence and mutual respect that makes our professional partnership so effective. The proposition represented something Eleanor had never imagined possible. A relationship that acknowledged her capabilities and autonomy rather than demanding their surrender. Crawford had rejected her for independence that threatened his need for control. Parker was proposing a union specifically designed to honor that same quality. This would be highly unconventional, she noted, though her tone held consideration, rather than rejection. As is everything about our partnership thus far, he responded with a slight smile. Convention would have denied Blackstone your expertise, the mining community your innovations, and me the privilege of witnessing your remarkable capabilities. I see little value in returning to conventional limitations now. Eleanor studied the document again, noting the careful provisions ensuring her continued legal authority over her business interests and personal assets regardless of marital status. Parker had essentially designed a framework that protected her independence while creating space for genuine partnership, professional and personal integration without subordination. You've approached this with the same thoughtful consideration. You apply to mining operations, she observed, a warmth in her voice that transcended professional appreciation. The principle is the same, recognizing values others might overlook due to conventional thinking. His expression grew more personal. Eleanor, I admire your capabilities and respect your independence. I'm proposing partnership precisely because of these qualities, not despite them. In that moment, Eleanor recognized how profoundly her life had transformed since arriving in Black Ridge. The rejected mail-order bride had found not just employment or even business partnership, but a man whose vision of relationship directly opposed the control Crawford had attempted to establish. Parker valued exactly what Crawford had feared: her independence, intelligence, and determination. I accept your proposition, she said simply. Both partnerships merit continuation and development. Their agreement required no elaborate declaration or conventional romantic gestures. Like their business partnership, it was founded on mutual recognition of value and compatible vision rather than prescribed social forms. The understanding between them had developed naturally through shared purpose and demonstrated respect, creating a foundation far stronger than traditional courtship might have established. The following spring, as Blackstone's expansion reached full production and the consortium model gained recognition throughout Western mining operations, Eleanor Hayes and Gabriel Parker formalized their dual partnership in a ceremony as unconventional as their professional collaboration. The marriage contract, drafted with the same care as their business agreement, established legal protections for Eleanor's professional authority and financial independence that contradicted normal marital property assumptions. Highly irregular, the county clerk had commented upon recording the document. Though increasingly typical of Blackstone's approach to established practices, William Crawford attended the ceremony with surprising graciousness. His antagonism gradually transformed, through necessity, into genuine respect for the operational excellence Eleanor had brought to the entire consortium. Margaret Harrington's congratulations remained somewhat reserved, though her acknowledgement that capability should indeed be valued regardless of conventional categories represented remarkable evolution from her initial assessment. Edward Thornton, representing the Hamilton Group, offered perhaps the most fitting observation during the celebration that followed. The most valuable innovations often emerge when traditional boundaries are questioned by those with both vision and capability. Blackstone's success demonstrates this principle extends beyond mining operations to human relationships themselves. For Eleanor, standing beside the man who had recognized her value when Crawford deemed her too independent, the moment represented perfect vindication. The quality that had made her unsuitable as a conventional bride had become the foundation of both her professional success and personal happiness. Independence, she reflected, as she surveyed the gathering of mining industry leaders who now sought. Her expertise wasn't about isolation or rejection of connection. It was about entering relationships from a position of recognized value rather than prescribed limitation. Parker had understood this distinction from their first meeting, offering partnership when convention would have demanded subordination. The mail-order bride rejected for independence had found something far more valuable than the conventional marriage she had originally sought. She had discovered a partner who valued her mind as much as her presence, who sought her perspective rather than her compliance, and who recognized that the most effective collaborations, in business and in life, emerged from mutual respect, rather than traditional authority. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.